Good afternoon, everyone, to the last meeting of this calendar year of the Transport, Regeneration and Climate Policy Committee. Our meeting today is open to the public and there is no items that contain exempt information. I'd like to welcome students from Newfield School who are in the balcony at the moment and giving us all a wave. Deputy Chair Alexi, Dimond and myself answered questions from them in the ante-room a little bit beforehand, and they were brilliant questions. So thank you very much for coming along to our meeting today, and anyone who's watching it from home on our live webcast as well. So as we know, the meeting is webcast and that recording will be available for people to view later on the Council's website. Now, we've received two remit public questions and two supplementary questions and also one agenda-related question for today's meeting. There are no petitions or statements that have been received on this occasion. And as always, can I please remind people to put their mobile phones or other such devices onto silent so as not to disrupt the conduct of the meeting. There's no fire alarm that's planned today, but if it does happen, then please do follow those instructions of the Town Hall staff. And the assembly point is Tudor Square. I am going to turn to my left and start with Sean to ask officers to introduce themselves who are in a seated position, and then I'll ask members of the committee as well. Sean.
Thanks, Chair. I'm Sean McLean, Council's Director of Regeneration and Development.
Thanks, Chair. My name is Will Stewart, Director, Investment, Climate Change and Planning.
Thanks, Chair. I'm Robert Parkin, Assistant Director for Legal Services and Legal Advisor to the committee today.
Thanks, Chair. I'm Rachel Appleyard. I'm the Principal Democratic Services Officer supporting the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. And I'll ask committee members to introduce themselves, starting with Alexi.
Thank you, Chair. My name's Alexi Dimond. I'm a Green Party Councillor in Gleaders Valley and Deputy Chair of this committee.
Hello, my name's Ruth Mercereau. I'm Councillor for City Ward and a member of this committee.
Good afternoon. I'm Mike Chaplin. I'm a Labour Councillor for Southey Ward and I'm a substitute member of this committee.
Thank you. I'm Craig Gamble-Pugh. I'm a councillor for East Ecclesfield Ward and a member of the committee.
Councillor Ian Horner, Liberal Democrat councillor for Baton Ward.
Andrew Sanger, councillor for Forward Ward and Lib Dem Group spokesperson on this committee.
Good afternoon. I'm Councillor Richard Shaw, Lib Dem councillor for Beecham and Greenhill Ward and member of this committee.
Thank you very much, Councillor Shaw, and I'm Councillor Ben Miskell. I am Chair of this committee. So that moves us on to item one, which is an opportunity to ask for any apologies that have been received. As I understand it, we've received apologies from Councillor Wright and also from Councillor Riddler. Do I see that any other apologies needed to be made? I don't think so. I think most of the committee are here, so thank you very much. That takes us on to item two, which is an opportunity for us to consider whether there's a necessity to exclude the public or the press from any item on our agenda today. And the meeting today is open to the public, and there are no items on the agenda that contain exempt information that would require such a thing. And in fact, it's very, very rare that we would need to do that. Item three is an opportunity for members of the committee to declare an interest. Obviously, if you are declaring an interest, can I ask you to tell us which is the item of business on the agenda that you wish to declare an interest in, and also to tell us whether it's a pecuniary or personal interest as well. Do you see any members of the committee who wish to make a declaration of interest? I don't see anyone indicating, so therefore we'll move on to item 4, which is an opportunity for us to consider the minutes of our previous meeting, which were held actually on the 27th of November, not so long ago. So 27th of November, those are available for people to follow at home on the council's website, and colleagues, members of the committee will have received copies of those as well. Do I see that members of the committee are content with us approving those minutes as a true and accurate record of our last meeting? I can see that some colleagues are nodding and that there's no dissent. So therefore, we will approve those minutes, and I'll sign and date them later at the end of the meeting. So thank you, colleagues. Item 5 is an opportunity for public questions and petitions. And I think in the preamble to the meeting, I did explain that we have received 2 remit questions. So that's related to the wider remit of this committee. The questioners have received written responses to those, and they've been circulated to members, and they're also published on the council's website for those people who might well be following from home. We have, in addition to that, had 2 supplementary questions and have received 1 agenda-related question. And I'm going to invite the questioners to present their question in turn. And I understand that Mr. Slack is in the room, and I can see him. Mr. Slack, do you want to, or Nigel, do you want to come and take a seat?
You'll have to excuse me, I'm on first reserve glasses today, so these may look a little odd on my face. So, my supplementary question. The response to my question is disappointing. Having delayed the implementation of Castlegate Conservation Area by some 5 years, the response suggests it is acceptable to again kick it into the long grass. The opening paragraph is stating the obvious, and the securing of additional funding is to be applauded, but it does not change the necessity of this call for immediate implementation of a conservation area, nor the urgency of the risk so many of the buildings in this area suffer under today. Best practice does not trump the law, which allows for the designation of a conservation area immediately and for consultation to follow that designation. You comment on the potential of an expanded city centre conservation area. This is wholly unacceptable to all conservation groups in the city, as it would dilute the safeguarding of both conservation areas. It is also notable that the Council's own wealth of expertise within the Conservation Advisory Group is seemingly subservient to an outside consultant. We know that Article 4 designation can be helpful, but would not have saved the Market Tavern. Can you please expand on the benefit gained for local heritage by delaying this designation? And has this policy committee had sight of the Victorian Society South Yorkshire proposal and the opportunity to comment on it? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nigel, for your supplementary question. And I guess this is kind of one of the complexities of our system, isn't it? That actually my original response on behalf of the committee is on the council's website and does go into detail there. In addition to what I sent to you over the past few days, on Monday morning, the Castlegate Area Board was briefed as part of their normal scheduled meeting on the timeline that is outlined in that response that was given to you, and they were content with us proceeding. As you'll be aware, the board is comprised of a diverse range of stakeholders in the Castlegate area and is chaired by the local MP. We've taken professional advice from officers in developing this timeline, and whilst I appreciate that you prefer us to designate a conservation area first and then consult afterwards, the approach is not consistent with the advice that we've received. I'm confident that the agreed timeline is both robust and appropriate, and it allows for a recommendation to be made by the end of March of next year, in just 3 months. Should this recommendation be to grant the conservation area status for Castlegate, a consultation period will follow, leading to a final decision on that this summer. And whilst no member of this committee would seek to preempt that outcome, I want to reiterate that I'm on record as supporting a conservation area for Castlegate, an option which I know is shared by many members of this committee as well. I think it's probably important to also say that the option for a discrete conservation area for Castlegate instead of an expanded city centre conservation area is not off the table. Further stakeholder engagement is planned leading up to a recommendation, and I can assure you that this will include seeking the views of the Sheffield Conservation Advisory Group. Comments from stakeholders have on the appropriateness of expanding the city centre conservation area, and all sorts of other options will be part of that. You know, I'm looking forward to this expedited work starting in January, and that has been made possible thanks to funding from government and also from Historic England as well. So thank you very much for bringing your question today, and also the supplementary question that you posed to us today. It's very much appreciated. Our next question is a remit-related, agenda-related question. I'm still getting my head around our different public question and petition scheme. Is a remit question, and as I understand it, Mr. Shipton is due to ask that question. Peter, if you would mind coming up to the microphone, that'd be really appreciated.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to ask the question. After I posted the question, literally within 24 hours, an official announcement was made that there's a developer on board to redevelop the ski village. So the question is, are there any plans to reopen the ski slope centre in Sheffield? And is it possible that the interested snow sports community in Sheffield can do anything to contribute to make this happen? So it's specifically as a ski centre is the question.
Thank you very much for the question. And of course it's something that is going to be on our agenda today, and we're really excited about the regeneration that's happening at Parkwood Springs. We all know, don't we, that is the size of Hyde Park in area. It's a really significant part of our city that looks out across Crooks, Walkley and Hillsborough, and has some incredible views, and people will remember from when the ski village was operational just what a valuable asset it is to the city. But of course we know, don't we, that lots of people still use that site, and the Parkwood area board that is chaired by the local MP is the forum that we bring together all those different community stakeholder voices. That did meet very recently and will be meeting again. Now we are continuing to work with Skyline of New Zealand in order to bring forward plans for the redevelopment of that site, or part of it, as a leisure destination. And today the report that we'll receive will talk about how we are working together collaboratively with Skyline to sign a memorandum of understanding. There'll be lots of opportunities as part of that memorandum of understanding and as part of that work to consider various different uses for the site in terms of a leisure destination, and we wouldn't want to take options off the table at this stage. I think one of the things that's really important to say is that we really do want to continue to hear your voice, and one great way that you can take in order to make sure that your voice is heard is to take part and join the Friends of Parkwood Springs group. They're an integral part of our regeneration of that area. You can find that group on the website. They do some fabulous community work to really bring to life the park, and are helping us guide the regeneration of the area. So I guess in summary, we continue to work with Skyline in order to master plan and create a master plan for leisure facilities in the Parkwood site, and developing those, and we'd encourage you to be part of that wider conversation and to join if you're not already a member of the Friends of Parkwood Springs. Thank you.
That's great, thank you.
We also have another supplementary question from Mr. Cronshaw, who unfortunately was not able to attend today, and therefore will make sure that he receives a written response to his question, and also that members of the committee are made aware of that response, and that it's also available on the council's website. So thank you very much to members of the public for asking questions today at our meeting. Item 6 is an opportunity for members of the committee to ask questions. None were received, but just to give people who are following at home more of a kind of an understanding. We do have regular briefings, and we meet together outside this space, and therefore there is an opportunity for members of the committee to get involved in dialogue about many of the projects that we do oversee. So members of the committee do ask questions. They perhaps are not asking questions today, but they have asked questions outside of the space as well, because we work collaboratively to develop so many different things that are in our remit. Item 7 is on page 21 of the agenda pack, and it is the work programme. And Rachel, I think you're going to take us through it.
Thank you, Chair. So the work programme for the committee aims to show all the known substantive items for forthcoming meetings of the committee. You'll notice on page 23 of the report there is a motion that has been referred to this committee from full council, part of a motion, and that is to ask this committee to consider whether to add river quality and restoration to their work programme. So that's something for members to give some consideration to. There are amendments listed on page 25. However, I will add that there was an updated work programme circulated on Friday, which contains some further changes from officers, particularly around the split of items between this year and next year. So that's the more updated version. And I'll hand over to officers if you've got any specific questions on items. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel. I think that's really important to stress, isn't it? At our last committee meeting, members of the committee requested that we did make absolutely clear which items were likely to be coming forward in this municipal year and which items were going to be coming in the next municipal year. And we've had the foresight to plan into the longer term as well, and that therefore makes our work programme look very extensive, and of course it is. But actually, we just wanted to add that extra clarity to make sure that it was really obvious which items and which agenda items were coming forward in this municipal year up until May of 2025. Do I see any questions or points of clarification from colleagues in the room? Councillor Dimond.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's just a point of clarification about the. So we've got the full council motion that we've been asked to consider this time. Last time we had the make Sheffield a pedestrian-friendly city, which we agreed to add to the walking, wheeling and cycling investment plan. Does that need to be explicitly on the work plan?
Rachel, I'll turn to you for some guidance.
Yes, so regarding the motion from the last meeting, there is due to be an update on the walking, wheeling, cycling investment plan. I think it's due spring next year, so it will be fed into the report on that item. The one that's been asked, members are asked to consider today, if that's something you do want to add, then that's something that you need to sort of put forward as a proposal from today.
Councillor Dimond, is there anything you'd like to come back on that point?
No, I'm happy that that's going to be included in the walking, wheeling, cycling investment plan. So does somebody need to propose adding the latest full council motion to our work plan?
Apologies, Councillor Diamond, we were just in discussion there because, of course, that referral from full council was to our committee as well as to Communities, Parks and Leisure. So I think that's perhaps at least creating a little bit of confusion in my mind. So apologies. I'll just turn to Rachel.
Yeah, just in terms of this committee, if members did wish to add it to the work programme, then you do need to make a decision to do that today.
I'll also just turn to Will Stewart.
Just by way of information, I think, Chair, obviously the pedestrian-friendly city has been added into an existing programme, so that's given full exposure through that programme, so that can be considered. There may be an opportunity for members to look at this specific motion through other work packages that we are delivering. So, for example, the Council is part of the Connected by Water partnership that looks at our waterways across the catchment area of South Yorkshire, which is an opportunity to look at some of the river stewardship and conservation angle. There are other opportunities through our flood management strategy where we could pick some of this up. I guess just seeking some guidance from Rachel whether this needs to be specifically agreed as a standalone item, or whether members could ask officers to make suggestions about how the motion could be incorporated within other policies and other strategies that we're looking at.
Yes, so as Will's just explained, that is a perfectly viable way of doing it. If there's other items on the work programme that this can feed into rather than being a standalone item, that is fine. But what you may wish to do is consider this more a briefing to sort of fully understand. I'd probably suggest, if you're not sort of 100% sure on how you want to handle it now, that would be the best way to do it, and then report it back to the next meeting.
Thank you, Rachel and Will. So if I'm clear, and I think Will's just added there, that it might be a good idea for us to consider a joint briefing with Parks and Community Parks and Leisure in terms of kind of the best way forward, because of the complexity of this one, not as a kind of policy area, but because it's a cross-cutting theme. Councillor Dimond, are you content with that approach if we were to organise a joint briefing with the other relevant committee? I can see that you indicated your support for that. Okay, Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Last month I highlighted that, well, at that time we were due to have 8 items on the agenda at this meeting, and we're down to just 2. But it does mean that February's agenda on the work programme has swelled to 16 items, 11 of which are decision-making items, not just briefings or updates. Is 3.5 hours enough for 16 items? Assuming we want to actually have a good discussion on like the annual climate report and other things, it does seem very ambitious.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. I think it's a very good point, isn't it? I think what we find as we get closer to committees, and when it becomes much clearer in the development cycle of reports, we get much of a clearer idea of which items can perhaps sometimes be kind of merged, which items will fall off the agenda, and which items might be dealt with in a different way. I should probably also update the committee about my investigations about TROs, and we received a large number of TRO decisions in this committee, and that's often because people have made representations, many of which support, but if there's just one objection to a TRO, then that does trigger, therefore, a full report to come to this committee. Many of those decisions on traffic regulation orders, particularly when it comes to things like 20-mile-an-hour zones, are actually in line with the policy direction that this committee has set. And I think it would be a good idea if this committee, perhaps outside of this place, were to consider how best we dealt with traffic regulation orders, and whether they were best dealt with perhaps not on the full floor of this committee, in line with the approach from other authorities, particularly when they're in line with our kind of broader strategic policy direction that we've set. So I do appreciate, Councillor Shaw, that we do have a very busy agenda as a result of this committee today being rather light. However, it will become clearer further down the road, hopefully, how we manage that committee, and there'll be discussions in the run-up to it as well. Councillor Horner.
Thank you, Chair. Just a brief question. Given we're talking about river quality, etc., we had a discussion about repair to a culvert several meetings ago, and I did ask for a report on the state of all our culverts, which I suspect would have an effect on water quality if they were to become damaged and breach their banks, as it were. So can I ask where we are with that report?
Councillor Horner, we're just conferring amongst ourselves about that. I think if you're in agreement, we try to get you a written response to that particular question. As I understand it, I think it came as part of a report that may well have been presented by James Mead on a flooding related matter, and it was a very good question. I think it was related to item 9 on the agenda that was discussed in June of this year, and it related to some work in Deepcar, didn't it, as well? So apologies, I think we need to make sure that you've got a full written answer to that, and we'll record that in the minutes to make sure that it is done. Colleagues, do I have any other comments or observations or matters of clarification about the work programme? I don't. Therefore, are colleagues content with us passing and approving the work programme as is? We know that it is, of course, a document that is evolving and will continue to evolve before we get to the next meeting, and will hopefully address many of those points that Councillor Shaw has made and does continue to make. I can see that colleagues are nodding, perhaps, and that there's no dissent, so therefore that item, our work programme, has been carried. So that takes us to the substantive items for discussion and decision at our meeting today. As we say, all of our meetings, for each of the substantive items that's going to be coming on our agenda, please could I remind everyone of the process that we are going to be following. So our officers will be invited to present the report to the committee, and Jane will be taking us through the next item on the agenda. We are going to assume that members have read the report, which of course they will be doing. The officer will be providing a high-level summary, and that will be followed by an opportunity for members to then ask questions of the officer. And then once those questions have been asked and then responses have been provided, we'll then move on to a discussion of the item if it is needed. Then, after that discussion has taken place, we'll then move on to either agreeing or not the recommendations that have been outlined. Item 8 is the Q2 budget monitoring report. It is on page 37 of the agenda pack, and I think Jane is taking us through it. Jane.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Jane Wilby, Assistant Director of Finance and Accounting, and the report is to provide the committee with an update of the financial position for the second quarter of 24-25, which is 6 months of accounts to the 30th of September and a 6-month forecast to the end of the year. The full report was taken to the Finance and Performance Committee on the 18th of November, so some of you may have heard this update already, but it's important for the committee to consider the overall financial context when considering decisions that make an impact on committee budgets. The Council is reporting a 34 million overspend against the budget, which is approximately 7% of our net revenue budget. The Council plans to fund this in-year deficit through a combination of drawing from reserves and use of a specific provision set aside to manage our subsidy loss issue. The financial position is driven by 3 main factors: funding reductions, increased demand and rising costs. We've experienced significant funding reductions across local government, and Sheffield has £858 less to spend per household in real terms compared to 2010-11, which is a reduction of 26%, which is well above the national average of 18%. We're experiencing increased demand for our services, particularly from our most vulnerable citizens, and post-COVID we've experienced significant levels of inflation, which has impacted on our cost base. 34 million overspend is substantial, and our officers are working diligently to develop solutions to reduce key areas of overspend. The position has remained stable from the Q1 outturn, but targeted work from finance with service colleagues over the last quarter has helped us understand the drivers of the cost challenges and develop some collaborative action plans. We are forecasting to deliver 40 of the 42 million savings target that was put in the budget last year, achieving 95% success rate. The main challenges that have emerged throughout the year are in adult social care, education, children and families, housing, finance and performance committees that have significant overspends. The issues are primarily due to the rising demand and costs in adult social care, home to school transport for children with special educational needs, and tackling increased homelessness in the city. The Transport, Regen and Climate Committee budgets are forecasting to balance against a net revenue budget of 36.7 million as at Q2, which shows good overall budget management across the services falling in with the committee remit. However, there are some big overspends and offsetting budget underspends. The biggest risk to the committee budgets are within the planning applications and building standards, with services forecast to fall short of income targets within the year. There's been some slippage on some major developments which should be falling into the next financial year. Additional income in highways permits are providing some offsets for this shortfall. The Council's key response to the financial challenges is our Future Sheffield programme, which is focused on transforming our services to create a more sustainable and efficient operating model. Transformation is essential to ensure we can continue to deliver statutory services while supporting city growth. Our transformation efforts align with the Council's broader strategic goals and have played a significant role in our budget setting process this year. Our medium-term financial strategy, published in July, identified a budget gap of 68.9 million over the next 4 years, with 31 falling next year. The autumn statement from government indicated that we may get a 3.2% real-term increase in core spending power for 25-26, and an announcement of plans to reform the funding allocation, starting with a targeted approach for 25-26, followed by a broader redistribution from 26-27. This should result in a clearer multi-year financial outlook, which would aid our strategic planning and resource management. Services have worked hard to develop savings proposals to bridge next year's gap, and a full report was presented to the Finance and Performance Committee this week, with the estimated gaps to be close to around 1.7 million at this stage. We've received the full details of the finance settlement today and working through the details of that, and we'll be presenting to the Strategy and Resources Committee a revised budget update in February ahead of full council budget approval in March. So the paper is to note the financial position, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Jane, for taking us through the budget monitoring report that we do receive as part of our regular meeting cycle. Do you see any members of the committee who wish to ask a question of clarification? Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. It's more a question / comment for yourself rather than Jane, if others want to ask questions first.
More than happy to. Councillor Dimond.
Yes, thanks. Thanks for the report. Just got a quick question. So, are the increases in national insurance fully feeding into this this budget document? And also, I suppose from what you've said today, the settlement has come out. This is kind of out of date already, isn't it? Because there's been announcements like increasing funding for homelessness and things that might impact or should impact this document.
So the budget update that you've got is a reflection of the current year position where we are there, the 34 million overspent, and then where we've got to so far with budget setting. So the budget setting, we've got a draft position where we've kind of bridged up to 1.7 million gap at this stage, and then we'll be working through the details of the settlement. And as you say, a lot of that wasn't known when we had the initial announcement from government in the autumn statement, so we're kind of unpicking that at the moment. There's been an assumption around national living wage and NI contributions and how that would impact us, but until we get the settlement and work through the details, we're not going to fully know what the impact's going to be. So when we actually get into the balanced budget position, that will be coming through into March next year. So you're right, we don't know the full position yet, so we have to make a lot of assumptions to get to the stage that we're at before Christmas. But we get the nice Christmas present to work through and to look forward to when we come in January to present that back to members.
It's an interesting button. Thank you very much, Jane. Councillor Shaw, I think you had another question.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so I know it's not under our committee, but I'm quite alarmed by these £6.5 million overspend in home to school transport, with more children relying on taxis and things to get to school following the pandemic. And of course, since the pandemic, our bus network has shrunk. The number of services has reduced, and I wonder if that's had a negative impact on sending children and families in the city, and of course then a knock-on increase in cost to the council. So I'm wondering, Chair, if you would be amenable to working perhaps with the chair of the Education, Children and Families Committee and Simca to kind of investigate, and whether it be possible to investigate and address the barriers to send children using public transport, without, not having to rely on taxis for those who are able to independently get around. Of course, not everyone can use public transport, but I think we should be doing more to help those that can, and improving our public transport network in general. So.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. We might have some other colleagues who wish to come back on that in a short while. I think you're right to note, aren't you, that doesn't technically fall within the remit of this committee, and we do therefore have to be careful not to step on the toes of other committees. You highlight a really important issue, which Jane has also highlighted. As I understand it, there may well be budget proposals that come forward that look at many of those issues, and perhaps you may well have had discussions in your own group about many of those, and I would imagine that many of those will talk about increased independent travel training and how this authority is approaching that particular issue. I'll just take Councillor Gamble-Pugh.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. First of all, a declaration of interest. 2 of my children currently travel by SEND taxis to and from their educational placements. What I did want to flag up is that encouraging and enabling our SEND children and others to shift from private vehicles, even if they are taxis, onto the public transport network would be something which would come under the remit of this committee, and I support the moves that I'm aware of from the Children and Young People's Committee to put more investment into independent travel training. But it's not an easy fix. One of my children has just started independent travel training to kind of go by bus once a week, and it's taken the whole of their school career to get them to the point where they're able to take on that challenge, and we're very pleased and proud of them for being able to do so. But yeah, absolutely, if we can look at a kind of cross-party, cross-committee approach, because that initiative is part of the modal shift which we're trying to support here.
Thank you, Councillor Gamble-Pugh. And of course, I guess it's really timely, isn't it? Because we know, don't we, that Simca, the Mel Combined Authority, is currently consulting on bus franchising. We need to encourage all of our residents across the city to participate in that, because that's part of the solution, isn't it? Because yes, we're trying to get more young people and particularly those young people who can, with special educational needs and disabilities, to independently travel if they can, but we need to make sure that we do have those routes for them to be able to travel on as well, and therefore having control of our public transport infrastructure is really key to that, and I can see that colleagues across the room do all agree on that particular matter, regardless of party. Councillor Horner.
Yeah, just to support the 2 previous speakers, really. When I was on the Education Committee last year, I spent a long time saying to officers, what are we doing about moving to the alternatives? Have you spoken to Simca? And they said, oh yeah, that's a good idea. And I said, have you spoken to community transport? And they said, oh, that's a good idea. And I'm delighted as I am to have my ideas confirmed. it shouldn't have been left to me to think of it. But I think it is really important that we do this for all the reasons that everybody else has stated. It really is important for the future lives of these children to get them used to the idea of being able to access public transport. And sometimes they may need staffing to assist them to do that. But generally speaking, when it's been done, people need to help them for a few weeks and then it moves on. But we do need to address this because it is spiralling out of control. People consider they have a right to this transport, they've been given a right, and of course they will then access it. And if we don't do something fairly quickly, this budget is going to spiral out of control. So I do think, as Councillor Gamble-Pugh said, it is a matter for this committee. We all want integrated public transport. We all support that on a cross-party basis, and also the benefits to those children of having that access. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horner. I'll turn to Jane for her reflections in a second, but it seems that there's a consensus in the committee about the importance of this particular area. Would the committee be in agreement if I was to write to the chair of the Education, Children and Families Committee to offer our support and to reiterate how this direction of travel in their committee actually supports the wider transport vision that we have as a city, and that we would love to be able to assist. I guess mindful that this is an area that is overseen by them, but does have a direct link to our aspirations when it comes to providing an integrated transport system for all, and that's really important. I'll just take Councillor Dimond's reflection.
Yeah, thank you. Really support that proposal and welcome the work that is being done. I've been to a really useful briefing on this topic. But I think another thing that we could consider doing is writing to the mayor to ensure that school bus routes are available and to prioritise that in future franchising, and also to make sure that there are adequate bus shelters. I spoke to teachers at a school in one of my wards, and they said that the attendance rate drops off substantially when it's raining, and that one of the reasons for that is because if there's no shelters for people to wait at, and they haven't got, they're far enough away that they can't walk and they don't have access to a car, that you can't get to school, or parents will find it much more difficult to get their children to school. So yeah, we need to, if we could also write to Simca about making sure that timetabling make sure there's always a school bus basically, and that it's a viable route.
And it's an ideal time for us to write that letter, and some colleagues, some members of the committee will have been in a separate session as well, a briefing that we had early this week, where we were being updated about our response corporately to bus franchising that would be going to South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority. As part of that, there'll be a very long questionnaire that we corporately as an organisation are responding to, but there'll also be a covering letter, and I think Councillor Dimond did make those points in that briefing, and I would expect that the next iteration of that document would reflect some of the points that Councillor Dimond has made there about the importance, and particularly the link there to school attendance really, and again making sure that people have got that genuine choice about how they travel. So I do see, I think, that consensus that I should write to the chair of the Education, Children and Families Committee, and of course offer our support. I think Councillor Dimond made a very good suggestion there, which he said outside this place in a briefing, in terms of our response to the bus franchising consultation, and making sure that all of those issues that he's raised are part of our covering letter to South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority. Jane, I'll just come back to you as well. I appreciate many of the points are cross-cutting and cross-area, but that's the nature of the report that you bring to us as well, isn't it?
Sure, yeah, and I think it's a really interesting sort of reflection in terms of the cross-cutting issues, because I think this has really been identified as a cross-cutting issue across the council, really, and it's not, whilst it sits in Education, Children and Families, in terms of that modal shift to more active travel, certainly does fit in within this committee's remit, and it's interesting to think about a different angle, and perhaps where attention may have been focused in transformation efforts within the Education, Children and Families Committee, we're really looking at demand management and thinking about how we can reduce further reliance and further demand, as councillors have suggested. If the support is there, often people will naturally take it. So trying to introduce more independence with travel, but again, as Councillor Pugh has described, with his own personal circumstances, each case is very unique, so it's not one size fits all for this. So engagement with the Senkos and really, you know, promoting independence where that's possible is really being the key focus within the transformation efforts that are happening at the moment. So we do see that this problem isn't going away for the council, and we do not have enough budget to support the current volume that we've got of placements at the moment. So part of the work is to try and actively manage the additional demand that comes in, thinking about the internal fleet efficiency that we've got there, so looking at how we're managing that better, shifting people to personal travel budgets where parents can actually, you know, manage to get their own children to school where that's possible. So there's a lot of activities going on, but obviously the link with the wider strategic transport initiative is something that perhaps hasn't been covered within the work within that committee. So I think it's definitely welcome and would be a good addition to the work that's already underway, particularly, you know, to protect future council budget overspends, but also to be investing in the right thing for the city.
Thank you, Jane. Do I see any other contributions from colleagues on this particular agenda item? Councillor Dimond.
So not really a comment for Jane, but I just sort of want to push back on the idea of the council overspending. And obviously, in some areas you might overspend, but I think in reality what we've faced since 2010 and to continue to face, unfortunately, is huge underfunding and underinvestment, and that's something that national government needs to help us with, because I don't think anyone went into local politics to, you know, make cuts to services to vulnerable people, and I think, you know, we want to change that. We want to really end austerity and invest in our communities again. So.
Thank you, Councillor Dimond, and those reflections. And of course, I guess we use lots of accounting terms, don't we, when we're bringing forward these reports, and it's right and proper that we do so. But, you know, as politicians, we would seek to frame things in the correct way, and you've done so very appropriately as well. Any other colleagues who wish to ask a question, make a point? I don't think so. So therefore, are members of the committee content with approving item 8, which is the Q2 budget monitoring report that Jane has taken us through, and we've also had a discussion about? I can see that colleagues are nodding. Thank you so much, Jane, for taking us through it. It's very much appreciated. Next item is on page 53 of the agenda pack, and it is an update about the Parkwood regeneration, and Alan is going to introduce it. Alan, for people who are following at home, is it possible to introduce yourself as well?
Thank you, Chair. I'm Alan Seasman. I'm the Head of Regeneration within City Futures, and I've got an update report on Parkwood. I've got some slides to run through on this, and so I'll start on that. So if you could pop up the next slide, that'd be very helpful. Thank you. So just by way of background here, there was a report to the then Cooperative Executive Committee in January 22, which considered a number of options for Parkwood and how we take forward the development of the former ski village site. And that ended an agreement for lease with the then development partner, who were Extreme. The option chosen in ending that arrangement with Extreme was that officers would further develop the proposals for the site with an organisation called Skyline Luge from New Zealand. And discussions with Skyline have continued since this time, but with a clear understanding that dealing with the site's access and the condition of the site itself was needed before Skyline would be able to take forward any proposals for the site themselves. I've got a bit of a timeline which gives you some further background on how we got to these things. I'm going back to 2017, and in 2017 we had an open market competition to select a development partner, which was when we selected Extreme Destinations Limited as the people to bring that forward. Through 2018, we had an agreement for lease between the council and Extreme that was signed, and whilst working development proposals, Extremes then also agreed terms to sublet part of the site to Skyline for a luge. In moving through into 2020, the council secured £6 million of Get Britain building funding to help improve access to the site, and milestone dates were extended in the agreement for lease several times to reflect the impact of the COVID pandemic, which had landed on us at that time. Eventually, the council stepped in to procure the design and construction of an access road following a lack of progress by the development partner on this. And then in 2021, where the access arrangements were found to be complex and that delivery would be challenging on the timescale required by the funding that we'd secured. So at that stage, work on the road design stopped, and with the agreement to fund us, the £6 million of funding that we'd secured was reallocated to other priority projects within Sheffield. If you just skip the slide on again, please. Oh, back one. So that's it. So we took the decision not to extend the timescales via executive director, non-key executive director decision in August 2021, and that ended our current arrangements with Extreme at that point. Moving into 2022, in January, the cooperative executive approved the report on options that I mentioned at the beginning, and we commissioned some work on a transport assessment to investigate access options. In July 2022, we made a bid to the then Levelling Up Fund for Parkwood, and in November 22, we were informed that that bid was not successful. Subsequently, that bid was approved, and we were notified in November 2023 that Parkwood had been awarded funds under round 3, but based on our round 2 bid. So if we move the slide on again, with that funding announced, we've had £19.4 million for the work into Parkwood site. This includes creation of a new access road, including improvements to cycle and pedestrian access and improvements to the public realm. It includes enabling works for the development of the former ski village, including the treatment of Japanese knotweed, and includes wider improvements to the country park, including mountain bike trails, a new kiosk, new paths, and other improvements. Can you move the slide on again, please? So in terms of progress, we've got a Parkwood area board, the Councillor Miskell mentioned in response to questions earlier on, which is chaired by Jill Furness, the local MP, and has representatives from a wide range of interested local groups. These arrangements mirror what we've done both for the Gateway to Sheffield project centred on Castlegate and in the programme for funding in Attercliffe. Establishing this governance was part of the Council's participation in the Pathfinder funding pilot. Adding to the funding, adding the recently awarded funding for Parkwood means that the Council already has in place approval to accept the funding for the scope of works outlined in the bid. Future approvals will now be via the capital approval process. We originally expected the MOU of the funding to be signed in June, but we got confirmation of that in October, following announcements in the autumn statement. Progress in all elements of the bid have been made as far as possible whilst we've been waiting for that confirmation of that funding to come forward. So you can see there in that picture, that is a picture of a kiosk that has been built at the site. It's operational, and wider improvements to the country park have been made, including improvements to cycle trails, walking trails, and the opening up of the wider site. The transport assessment has been completed to inform access design and preliminary work. And in addition, work has been undertaken to look at the relocation of a local business, and that's been progressed and a site identified for that. Discussions with Skyline have also continued. With the funding now in place, we move on to the next slide. With the funding now in place to improve the site and improve the access, we are now talking with Skyline about getting a memorandum of understanding signed that will then allow us to enter into further negotiations about the development of the site, lease of the land, and allow Skyline to begin to look at their own proposals and bring them forward at pace. So that is a summary of the report. I'm happy to take further questions of that. There's a final slide which just shows you the amazing views from the top of Parkwood. And anybody who's not been there recently, I definitely encourage you to go and have a look around. So happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you, Alan. And we'd encourage people to look around, but maybe take their wellies at the moment because it's quite muddy as well, isn't it? Although those improved tracks will really help people get around. I apologise. I think I've seen Councillor Mesereau and yes, Councillor Mesereau.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd really welcome a site visit if that would be possible sometime. That'd be really useful. Thanks very much for the report. I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit more about the improvements to the cycle and pedestrian access. Also, I'm aware that there have been requests from the Kelham Island and Neepsend community for better signage from their side of the park up to the park. It would be really good to have some wayfinding and signage. Is there any update on that? Also interested to know about any cycle parking, including for adapted bikes, up on site, in order for people to get there and cycle up there and leave their bikes safely. And it's good to hear about the lighting at the entrances. That's a really welcome thing. Wondering if there's any plans to have on-site mountain bike hire to make it a bit more inclusive for people who don't own their own mountain bikes. I think that's all the questions from me. Thank you.
I can try and answer some of those. Be a bit of a varied thing. I think the first thing is some of those improvements there. If we could take a site visit up there, I can show you some of the stuff that's happened already, which has been about getting access back onto the former landfill site, basically to have a circular amount of network around that and join that network into other walking and cycling routes through there. In terms of improvements to the cycle and walking network into and out of the site, that's currently at the design stage, so we haven't got any firm opinions of that, and it will also need to kind of match in with other improvements in the area, particularly following kind of like improvements and plans for things around Shalesmore Gateway, which isn't currently funded, and what we're trying to do in Neepsend in terms of new housing. But so the short answer to that is I can't tell you any more about that because they don't physically exist yet. In terms of signage, I'll have to take that one away and see what the proposals are, but I'm sure that is something that we're looking to try and do as part of those proposals. And then in terms of parking on site, I don't know of anything. I can talk to colleagues in parks about that and about whether that's something we have got there and where the plan for that might be. And for mountain biking, whether we've got an offer there or not is part of what we will have in terms of discussions about the regional leisure destination. Certainly some of the conversations have been about how people will be able to better access the site and get from the top to the bottom, and how that's done is still part of the master planning for that process. But all along on this, one of the key things that we've been trying to do is the development of the leisure destination is not a fenced off or gated facility. It's a facility that will facilitate access through it so people can enjoy the wider park and other things there, and hopefully that would include things like mountain biking.
Thank you. Just to reiterate the need for cycle parking so that people can get to the site by bike, if that's what they choose to do, that'd be really good. A lot of the parks in Sheffield don't have that, or don't have enough of that, and it really excludes a lot of people from being able to access the park. And I'd really welcome an update on the signage when you're able to provide that, so that I can take that back to the Kelham Island and Neepsend residents who've been asking about it. They would really welcome good signage to be able to access the park. It's their nearest local space. Thank you.
Just come back on that as well, going back to the governance. Kinker are represented on the Friends of Parkwood, on the Parkwood area board, so they have a space in which they can feed that information in and we can talk about it there. Okay.
Thank you very much, Alan. I've got Councillor Chaplin and then I've got Councillor Dimond. Councillor Chaplin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Alan, for this report. It really is encouraging to see that work is progressing on this, and the money is certainly very welcome. I would also add my voice to. I mean, I've been lucky. I've been able to go up there, and I've had a couple of site visits. One with Sawboard and another with one of the main park ranger who works in that area, although he has other parks to deal with as well. it does really have so much potential, and I have to say well beyond the possibility of having a luge and that kind of facility, which obviously that's something that we want, but it is a much bigger area. It goes down into Hillsborough where the Ward's End Cemetery is. It goes across into the ward I represent, so I'll declare a personal interest for Southey Ward, where residents there, a lot of dog walkers take their dogs up onto the park, and some of the new bike trails that have been put in are much closer to that area. But again, it's the one ward where you have good signage and you have good car parking is Burngreave, and it's probably understandable given that ward does not have much in the way of green space. So it's quite right that they should have good access to it and the options to park and get onto the site. And obviously the cafe is nearby to that. But I would put a plea in for the other three wards, Southey, Hillsborough and City Ward, because it is not obvious to people as they come onto the park that they are coming onto Parkwood Springs, you know, this magnificent country park that we are creating in the middle of the city. So I would urge that for the other wards. And I will add that there are a couple of things that shouldn't go unnoticed, and that is that very sadly, because there's been a history of the tip, the council tip being on the site. These days it's the HWRC at Parkwood Road North, but unfortunately some residents nearby have taken the opportunity to do their own dumping, even though they live maybe 100 or 200 or 300 yards away from the site. So there has been a history of tipping onto the site of domestic waste, which is very, very sad to see. And it would be really helpful if some investment could go into getting people to understand what a great resource they have on their doorstep, and so that it's not one to be trashed. There was something else, but that has slipped my mind.
Thank you, Councillor Chaplin. Shall I just go to Councillor Dimond and then come back for some reflections from Alan? Councillor Dimond.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, thanks again for the report. It's really encouraging to see this progress, and thanks for including a timeline. That was really helpful for me. I'd also welcome a site visit. I think that would be really good to see all those things that have happened and any other things that you can show us that are in the pipeline. I'd probably agree with most of the comments by Councillor Mercer and Councillor Chaplin in terms of wayfinding being the key to ensuring that it's successful with good signposting and accessible active travel routes into Parkwood for each of the neighbouring or bordering neighbourhoods and wards. I spoke to some people that said there was a bit of a perception that access for the city centre residents was prioritised over the other areas, but that might be because of how the cost of the access route was projected. So I was just wondering as well what sort of if there has been engagement done with other local communities, or is there a plan for engagement with local people? And finally, just on the winter sports facilities. So just to confirm, is the luge still part of the plan? Is there potential for other winter sports facilities, bearing in mind that the site needs to be inclusive with something for everyone? And then I think we heard from the answer to the public question that the best way to engage with it at the moment would be to join the Friends of Parkwood Springs, or is there other ways that you can engage with the Parkwood Area Board?
Alan, many points there from Councillor Chaplin and Dimond. Are you able to help us out with those?
I'll try and pick them all up. So in terms of improvement signage, I think that came through from Councillor Measure's question. I think, yeah, we'll look at what that means in terms of the design of improvements to those facilities and liaise with Parks colleagues on doing that as well. A site visit, I'm happy to try and organise something along those lines. I think the point about access for city centre residents and access for people from other wards, it's certainly not the intention that this is only a facility for city centre residents. I think it's a facility for the whole of Sheffield. It really is, you know, it's big enough to do that, and it's part of, you know, another kind of addition to our open space, and links to other open spaces are critical in making sure that people have healthy lifestyles, and that's part and parcel of what we're trying to do. I think the issue of tipping, I think, is a really valid one. We've had to remove stuff from tipping. Having further activity on that site is part of that solution. There's more eyes and ears around, and, you know, throughout the day and throughout the evening, that is one way in which we can try to do that, and promoting the park for activity also helps people take greater ownership of it. So, you know, happy to say that's something we definitely want to do. In terms of engagement, I think the way that we've set up the governance for this and the established number of friends groups there, the Friends of Parkwood Springs are the one of a number of different groups up there. They're the people who are most active on the actual site, but there are other groups who have an interest who are all well represented on the area board. I think they send a representative to the area board, and I think that's probably the right way to do it. We are establishing a number of subgroups through that to look at particular things, and it might be that we can widen membership of that subgroup appropriately if those matters come up. To address the issue around other winter sports, the discussion with Skyline in particular, Skyline are a luge operator, that's what they do, but I don't think they or us have ruled out other things happening on the site, but there's nothing currently ruled in either, and it's yet to be decided, and depends on how much progress they can make with their master plan moving forward. Okay.
Councillor Chaplin.
Thank you, Chair. It's come back into my mind. Something else that also comes onto that site is the Shercliffe allotments. And currently, I believe there are only about 4 or 5 of them in use, and they're not in use for cultivation, but with pigeon fanciers, because they're the only ones who are prepared to barrier off their plot of land for their hobby. And the rest of it is one of those areas which, as I mentioned earlier, is used for tipping, and yet it is actually part of Parkwood Springs, and it would be helpful if a look, if maybe an options paper or something come forward to look at how best to deal with that site, because clearly it is not being used for the normal allotments purposes. That's not to gainsay what those people who like to keep pigeons are doing, but you've got quite a big chunk of land there that is effectively going to waste and being dumped on as well.
I just say thanks for bringing that to my attention. I'll talk to colleagues in Parks. I think it might be the best starting point for that, to see what they know or don't know about that. Okay.
Councillor Measurer.
Thank you. Quick question. It mentioned in the report about improved public transport access. Can you tell us a bit more about that, please?
These are, I suppose, public transport access for this, throughout all of this, is that access to the site generally needs to be improved to allow further access. So public transport is just part of the mix for this that we will get in terms of general transport improvements. There are further plans for greater, wider public transport access to the site, but they're in their infancy at the minute, so I couldn't give you any further detail at the moment.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Alan. Do I see any other contributions from colleagues in the room? Any questions? Councillor Gamble-Pugh.
I think it's just a comment, really, Chair. Thank you. Which is this is just such an exciting piece of work, and it's so positive to see it progressing. I think speaking from the point of view of someone that's representing and living in a ward in the north of Sheffield, one of the many challenges that we have about encouraging people to use active travel solutions is that we've got this kind of whole barrier where unless you're kind of going along Penistone Road, you know, that roadway is really the dominant kind of link, and yet just adjacent to there we've got this enormous green asset. So the more we can do to make it clearer to people how to access that from the surrounding residential areas and what the kind of cycling and walking routes are, the better, because there's a real gap there. Even for car drivers, you know, the geography means it, you know, it will make much more sense to kind of get a bus and then walk for a portion of your journey than it would to kind of loop all the way around in a car. So I would absolutely support that, and I think that would be really beneficial to people in my ward and the wider area. I'm just so pleased that we're sitting here celebrating a kind of £19 million investment. I remember kind of 15 years ago speaking to someone that was very active in the Friends of Parkwood Springs, who was saying that they were going to focus their volunteering time on campaigning against leaving the European Union and on redeveloping Parkwood landfill site as a green space. And I just thought, what a very strange thing to dedicate one's time to, because I couldn't really imagine that we would seriously contemplate leaving the European Union, nor could I really imagine that the old tip would actually be used as a beneficial green space. I'm really, really sorry that I was wrong about the former. I'm really glad that I was wrong about Parkwood. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gamble-Pugh. I don't know how to respond to that, but thank you for those reflections. Are there any other contributions that other colleagues will wish to make about this agenda item? I don't see any other contribution, so therefore that takes us to the decision point of this particular item. We know that it is contained on, I think, from page 53 onwards of the agenda pack, and can I ask colleagues if they are content with us approving the recommendations as they are outlined? I can see that colleagues are nodding. There are no dissent, and if there was, then colleagues would raise their hands. So therefore, this item has been carried. Thank you, Alan, for taking us through this, and you know, some of the fabulous work that's happening by you, but also by the wider team at Parkwood and the Regeneration there. That does take us to the end of our agenda. It is the last meeting of not the municipal year, but the calendar year, isn't it? And we often think about our meetings in municipal rather than calendar years, but residents of this city look at a year in terms of the calendar year. So I've just had a little look through our agendas, and our agendas are very, very busy. Just going to very quickly run through some of the things that we have done this year as a committee together and as a council. We've got 20-mile-an-hour zones in Fulwood, High Green, Lodgemore, Greenland and Brincliffe that we've considered and approved. We've approved a Clean Air Investment Fund. That was £1 million that we've invested into the expansion of school streets and part-time 20-mile-an-hour zones across the city, using that money from the Clean Air Zone. We have created and approved a decarbonisation route map on energy generation and storage. We have worked together collaboratively on an ambitious transport vision that outlines transport and our transport network in the city for many years to come. We have approved a road safety action plan, which is very detailed and allows us to reach our ambition of Vision Zero, which is to eliminate all fatalities and serious injuries on Sheffield's roads. We've rolled out a pilot for on-street residential charge points. We have found a solution to flooding in parts of Deepcar with the replacement and repair of the Clough Dyke in Deepcar. We've overseen exciting plans to regenerate the Devonshire Quarter and looked at exciting plans at Beehive Works. We have taken a decision to improve air quality and speed up bus travel on Arundel Gate and Furnival Street. We've made significant progress on the regeneration of Attercliffe, including some fabulous work at the Olympic Legacy Park, new housing at Attercliffe Waterside, and the regeneration of the older Delphi Cinema into a community space, which we're working on as a committee. The initial stage of development on a Sheffield walking, wheeling and cycling investment plan has been brought forward, which will be very crucial to guiding the next stage of our investment. We have approved bus prioritisation and safety improvements on Abbeydale Road and Ecclesall Road, which are very important. We have agreed the regeneration of Furness Hill and Neepsend as a catalyst site for redevelopment, and our work with Homes England, and we continue to work collaboratively with the Strategy and Resources Policy Committee on that. We have created, alongside our fabulous sustainability team, a land climate route map. We've created a cross-committee group looking at the enforcement of traffic regulations, and we have also brought forward plans and approved them at our last meeting for the pedestrianisation of Surrey Street, Charles Street and Pinstone Street, and to transform it into a prosperous, people-friendly space. And we have also, of course, seen significant reductions in nitrogen dioxide across the city when it comes to our clean air zone, which has been really, really positive. And all that has been on top of the work that we have all done together as a city, but also as a council, to transform Fargate, introducing new Dutch-inspired roundabout West Bar and new segregated cycle lanes in Tenter Street, linking all the way up to Neepsend. We have been rolling out more cycle hangers across the city, and we look forward to that in the new year. We've opened up new stores and a bike hub, as well as new office tenants that we've welcomed in heart of the city, as well as a new hotel on Pinstone Street, and we've overseen the fabulous transformation of Lear's Yard. And finally, the item that we have agreed today about the regeneration of Parkwood Springs and its transformation into a regional leisure destination. So I think there are over 20 different achievements of this committee this calendar year. So thank you very much to colleagues, to members of the committee, but also officers in bringing forward and helping us navigate the complexity of bringing many of these items together. I think we should all be proud of the work that we have achieved and also the efforts that we've gone to in order to bring the rest of the city along with us on that journey. So thank you very much, colleagues. And I think that closes our meeting.